Live from London and Berlin, this is CNN This Morning with the latest news, weather and business to start your day.
Hello and welcome. I'm Terry Martin in Berlin, sitting in for Bettina Lusha.
And I'm Juanita Phillips in London. Ahead on CNN This Morning, with less than 3 hours to go until the launch of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, we go live to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
The United Nations chief works to secure a deal for the handover of the Libyan suspects in the Lockerbie bombing.
And violence in the West Bank prompts Israel to halt its plans for troop withdrawal. Good morning, thanks for joining us. And we begin at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where the scheduled launch of the Space Shuttle Endeavour is only hours away. The mission will begin the construction of the International Space Station. The $60 billion station is intended to orbit the Earth for scientific research. And for more on the launch, I'm joined now by CNN correspondent Miles O'Brien. Miles.
NASA says everything is go right now, including the weather. There is a 70% chance, according to the weather people here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, that the weather will not be a problem as the Space Shuttle Endeavour begins the first assembly mission of the International Space Station. So far, the situation is the crew is boarding the Space Shuttle Endeavour even as we speak. The commander, Robert Cabana, is in his seat. The pilot, Rick Sturko, in his. Going beneath to the middeck, we find the cosmonaut, Sergei Krikalev, who is, as we speak, getting strapped in. If you can see the live pictures right now, he is being attended to by some of the technicians who are on board the space shuttle 195 feet off the ground at Launch Pad 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. Off to in the distance is mission specialist Jim Newman, who is one of the spacewalkers who will be involved in the 3 spacewalks, which are to occur over this week. The spacewalks will be conducted to connect power cables and connectors and put on handholds after the Space Shuttle Endeavour has mated the first U.S. piece of the International Space Station, a so-called node called Bring the Space Shuttle Endeavour close to Zarya and allow it to be mated to the Unity piece, which is the American piece of the International Space Station. Once again, NASA is saying all systems are go. The launch a little less than 3 hours from now, according to the schedule here. Weather here at the Cape is good. The crew being strapped in, communications checks underway, and we will, of course, keep you posted as we draw nearer to the beginning of what NASA hopes is a new era in space. Miles O'Brien, CNN, reporting live from the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
Miles, how does NASA justify the huge cost of this exercise to the American taxpayer? What do they get out of it?
Well, there's a lot of issues. I mean, NASA, of course, first of all, says there's a lot of scientific validity to putting a space station up there, that a lot of science can be conducted in zero gravity that can't be conducted anywhere in a one-gravity environment. Nevertheless, there are a lot of scientists who say the cost, which could reach $100 billion over the course of the 15-year lifespan of the space station, is way too high given the scientific benefits. Nevertheless, there are other issues, geopolitical issues, international relations issues, not the least of which this provides some hard currency for some Russian scientists who might be persuaded to go work for, say, North Korea or Iraq otherwise. So there is a lot more to this than science, a lot more to this than space. It has something to do with international relations as well.
Thanks very much, Miles. And to see the launch, you can join Miles O'Brien and the CNN team for live coverage of the shuttle liftoff in just under 3 hours. And you can follow the whole mission on the internet at cnn.com.
Welcome back. It's 5 minutes past 8 here in Berlin.
Hello and welcome to our viewers around the world. I'm Juanita Phillips at the CNN studios in London. Well, with the weather improving at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, NASA is moving ahead at full speed with plans to launch the Space Shuttle Endeavour. The orbiter is carrying the first American-built piece of the International Space Station. Dignitaries from around the world are in Florida for the liftoff, as well as our own space correspondent, Miles O'Brien. Miles?
Juanita, we'd like to welcome all of our viewers in North America as well as around the world. The situation here at the Kennedy Space Center, all systems appear to be go. All 6 members of the Shuttle Endeavour crew are on board. The hatch is sealed, and according to the NASA weather people, the weather outlook is pretty good. There is a band of showers headed this way, and there is some concern that the showers may cause some difficulty because there is a narrow 10-minute window for this launch. Of course, the Shuttle Endeavour carrying the first American piece of the International Space Station, and the crew will, led by the commander, Robert Cabana, who you see here getting suited up and getting ready to get on board a few moments ago, will have to rendezvous with a Russian piece which was launched into orbit about 2 weeks ago. That Russian piece, called Zarya, is a propulsion and power unit. The Unity piece, which is the American piece, is a so-called node. It will attach future pieces of the space station together and serve as a docking place for space shuttles in the future. Of course, this International Space Station has been much debated and much discussed. NASA hopes that this evening, this morning, will be the beginning of a new era. But why are 16 nations attempting this superhuman endeavor?
We need the space station because if we're ever going to live anywhere besides on Earth, this is our step to doing that.
But at what cost? One government accounting office estimates the U.S. bill for construction and operation of the space station over 15 years will approach $100 billion, much to the dismay of many scientists.
Right now, the space station stands as the single greatest obstacle to the exploration of the solar system. And that's sort of sad.
Physicist Robert Park believes NASA should still shoot for the stars, but leave the humans behind.
For a fraction of the cost of a space station, we can send armies of robots to Mars and find out if there is a reason to send a human being.
The question of whether the space station is worth it really depends on why you're doing it. As a foreign policy initiative to keep Russian rocket scientists in Russia and out of North Korea, it's a bargain at the price. If you think it's just a science project, though, it's a tremendous boondoggle and ought to be canceled immediately.
While the debate rages on, so too does the construction. 80% of the U.S. hardware is now complete.
Anybody who goes to Kennedy Space Center right now and looks at the hardware that's sitting in line, ready to go into space or close to being ready to go into space, stopping it now would also be a tremendous waste.
But is it good money after bad?
The 2 most important reasons to build the space station are for science and for exploration. We're never going anywhere if we can't get off the planet.
Getting off the planet is exactly what the crew of the Space Shuttle Endeavour would like to do right this moment. You're looking at live pictures. Kennedy Space Center, the Shuttle Endeavour fueled, the crew on board, the hatch sealed, the weather looking fairly good for a liftoff in a little less than 2 hours' time. Now, as we mentioned in that story, NASA is putting a lot of money, time, and effort into this International Space Station with its 15 international partners. With me here live to talk a little bit more about that, Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. Madam Secretary, thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be with you, Miles.
Your first launch, it's an exciting moment, I guess.
It's great. And, you know, as Secretary of State, I spent an awful lot of time dealing with disputes between countries and civil wars and ethnic turmoil and refugees, and it is really terrific to be able to participate or watch this event where 16 nations are cooperating in something that's an investment in the future.
You hear a lot of scientific debate. Many scientists go back and forth as to whether it's worth the potential $100 billion cost of running a space station for 15 years. You hear less talk about a debate on whether it's worth it on an international relations level. Would you concur with that? Is this something that is good for all nations of the world?
Well, I think it is, but it's also my understanding that it's good scientifically, because the kinds of things that they're going to be able to do will deal with biology, biodiversity, climate change, a way to really map movements in this hemisphere, so that scientifically it is also very important, and it requires people to work at it together. And the fact that there is this kind of cooperation on issues that are really the issues of the 21st century, I think, is our gift to the future generations.
Of course, one of the principal partners with NASA in this, the Russians, the economic collapse there has delayed this mission by at least a year and has caused concern about future delays down the road as the Russians try to build additional pieces. How satisfied is the Clinton administration right now that this partnership is healthy?
Well, first of all, I do think that the Russians are contributing hard knowledge to this, and that's very important. It's also very important to have Russian scientists working on this particular kind of a project rather than others. And so we're very glad to have them be a part of it, and we are obviously working to make sure that the Russian relationship is one that remains steady. It's a key relationship to us, clearly, and their financial problems are ones that concern us, and they have to develop plans to deal with them.
And when you say it's important to have Russian scientists working on this project as opposed to others, be a little more specific about that. The concern is they may go to say, North Korea.
Well, they are, part of the problem is that with the breakup of the Soviet Union, many of them were in a position of losing their jobs or finding not being central to a lot of the things that they had to do, and there is the danger. There are many countries that are seeking knowledge about nuclear issues and other weapons of mass destruction and proliferation, and I think that it's very good to have the Russian scientists involved in this kind of a project.
Of course, we're not just talking about the Russian space scientists. The nuclear weapons machinery in Russia as well is susceptible to the same problem. Is enough being done to ensure that that knowledge doesn't get into the wrong hands?
Well, we are working very hard on that. As you know, also, there is a program known as the Nunn-Lugar program, which worked on trying to figure out how to safeguard the missiles. And so, generally, we truly do think that it's important for us to work on the whole issue of how to safeguard. Also, I have to say, what is important in this particular mission, Argentina has a payload on this. And what is interesting is it is very good that they're cooperating on this kind of a mission, because they, too, 20 years ago, were thinking about nuclear programs. They were thinking about cooperating with Iraq. So this is a very important mission in that regard also. As we speak, sort of a related story, the North Koreans, there is talk and there is intelligence here on the U.S. side that indicates there may be another missile test being planned in North Korea. How severe would the consequences be should North Korea launch yet another missile? Well, we are obviously very concerned about North Korea's activities in terms of proliferation issues, and we're working on those very hard. Talks are going on. It is something of concern. We have asked former Secretary of Defense Perry to work with us on a review of North Korean policy, or policy towards North Korea, and obviously we're concerned. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, thanks so much for being with us on CNN this morning. Hope you enjoyed the launch. I'm looking forward to it, Miles. All right. Thank you. Take care. Yeah. Once again, to bring you up to date, Juanita, the situation is looking good for NASA. The weather looks good. The crew on board the Space Shuttle Endeavour, and if all goes well, in about an hour and a half time, we will see the Space Shuttle Endeavour launch into an orbit about 240 miles above us for the first assembly mission of the International Space Station. Juanita? And Miles, just take us very quickly through what the astronauts will actually be doing once they're up in orbit. Well, once they go into orbit, they're going to go to sleep. They have a pretty strange schedule. It's going to be sort of a swing shift, if you will, and the way they have set up this entire mission in order to rendezvous with the Russian piece, in order to get their sleep schedule right and to get the landing schedule just right. They're going to go up. This is toward the end of their day. They'll go to sleep. Of course, they might be a little bit excited. It's anybody's guess how much sleep they'll actually get. Miles O'Brien in Florida, thanks very much for that update. And of course, as Miles mentioned, he and the CNN team at the Kennedy Space Center will be back with us live for the launch of Endeavour coming up in about an hour and 40 minutes. And you can follow the whole mission on the internet at cnn.com. And now for our viewers in Latin America and Asia, here's World News. And for our viewers in Europe and Africa, that's it for this edition of CNN This Morning. I'll be back with more news at the top of the hour. Thanks for joining us. Space Station. The $60 billion station is intended to orbit the Earth for scientific research. And joining us now from Florida with the latest on the launch is CNN's Miles O'Brien. Miles, is it all still going according to plan? Well, Juanita, the only fly in the ointment potentially is the rain, which you may or may not be able to see on your screens right now. The band of showers is passing through Cape Canaveral as we speak. If the shuttle were to launch right at this moment, the mission control here would have to, the launch control
would have to scrub the mission and try another day. However, they still have 45 minutes to go or so, and the weather prognosticators say the rain, which we're experiencing right now, should be out of the area by then, making it possible to launch the shuttle Endeavour, which you see right now at Launch Pad 39A, about 3 miles from where I stand here at the Kennedy Space Center. On board, 6 astronauts led by Commander Bob Cabana, a Marine colonel on his 4th flight. And inside that payload bay is the first U.S. piece of the International Space Station. They call it a node, which essentially is a passageway or a docking area onto which future pieces of the International Space Station, as well as future shuttles, will dock. It will be mated with a Russian piece, which was launched into orbit about 2 weeks ago. That Russian piece is a power plant, provides propulsion, and provides communication services for the early stages of the embryonic space station. This is the first assembly mission, as we told you. It is the beginning of a new era in space. Some 16 nations in all are partners in this International Space Station project. It should take about 5 years to build. 100 separate pieces are involved in all of this. Many dignitaries from all the countries involved in this are here to witness the launch, among them U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. I asked her about what she thinks about the nature of this multinational partnership.
It's good scientifically, because the kinds of things that they're going to be able to do will deal with biology, biodiversity, climate change, a way to really map movements in this hemisphere, so that scientifically it is also very important, and it requires people to work at it together. And the fact that there is this kind of cooperation on issues that are really the issues of the 21st century, I think, is our gift to the future generation.
Of course, many observers have wondered if it might take generations for the Russians to complete their portion of the International Space Station. This particular launch of Endeavour has been delayed by a year. The Russian economic collapse made it difficult for the Russian Space Agency to complete their portion of the hardware. However, with a bailout from NASA, the hardware has been completed and the mission is set to begin. Nevertheless, I asked Secretary of State Albright what she thinks about the health of the U.S.-Russian partnership.
With the breakup of the Soviet Union, many of them were in a position of losing their jobs or finding not being central to a lot of the things that they had to do. And there is the danger. There are many countries that are seeking knowledge about nuclear issues and other weapons of mass destruction and proliferation. And I think that it's very good to have the Russian scientists involved in this kind of a project.
All right, you're back looking at live pictures of the Space Shuttle Endeavour. It is fueled up. It is loaded up with its crew members, 6 crew members in all. 1 of them a Russian cosmonaut, 5 of them U.S. astronauts, ready for launch in about 45 minutes. If the weather holds, it appears there are no technical issues which NASA is having to deal with thus far. As they say here, all systems are go, and the NASA folks here are hoping it's the beginning of a new era in space. Juanita?
Miles, there's been quite a bit of criticism about the expense of this venture. How is NASA responding to those criticisms?
Well, NASA says that there is a lot of good science which can be conducted, allowing an International Space Station to be up there and to have a permanent presence in space. The average shuttle mission lasts about a week or so, perhaps is stretched out over 2 weeks. And some of the things which they try to conduct in zero gravity, some experiments which cannot be conducted with gravity, really cannot get started on a short shuttle mission like that. So NASA is trying to sell it as a science program, but there is also much more to it, of course. It has a lot to do with international relations and the fact that the Clinton administration would like to find ways to keep Russian scientists otherwise occupied, lest they be tempted, given the economic collapse, to sell their services to, say, a North Korea.
And Miles, what about public support for this venture? Has it been boosted, do you think, by John Glenn's recent return to space?
Well, clearly NASA is enjoying the afterglow of that particular mission, a tremendous amount of public interest. Now, it should be noted, however, that the response thus far to the space station has been a bit muted. I don't think since it has been on paper, people haven't had a chance to really understand what it's all about. And if the turnout by the media is any indication, this is about 600 about 600 media people are here. Normally there are about 200 or 300 for the average shuttle launch. For the John Glenn mission, there were upwards of 3,000 members of the media here. So if that's any indication of the public interest, NASA has a long way to go to sell this program.
Miles O'Brien in Florida, thanks very much. And CNN is planning live coverage of the launch today, and that's due to begin in about half an hour from now. Northern edition of CNN This Morning. I'm Juanita Phillips in London. Thanks for joining us. And don't forget, there will be live coverage of the launch of the Space Shuttle Endeavour. That coverage starting in about 15 minutes.
Following is CNN's coverage of a live event.
Hello, I'm Rosemary Church at the CNN Center. The United States Space Shuttle Endeavour is about to lift off from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We go live now to CNN's Miles O'Brien at the center. Miles, what's the status?
Rosemary, right now we are in a routine hold which occurs at the 9-minute mark before a launch. And right now the big concern is the weather here at the Kennedy Space Center. Let's listen in to Bruce Buckingham of the Kennedy Space Center, NASA, for just a moment, see what he has to say.
Support launch today. We will be holding at T-minus 5 minutes unless we get resolution of our RTLS concern prior to that.
All right, just to translate for you, RTLS means return to launch site. That is an abort scenario. If the shuttle were to lose a main engine on ascent, one of the abort scenarios would call for the shuttle to return to the Kennedy Space Center, and that is one of the big concerns for rain in the area. As a matter of fact, there can't be rain within 10 miles in order to support this RTLS, which is an important abort scenario. Now, you're looking at some close-up shots of the nose end of the Space Shuttle Endeavour. The 6-member crew is on board, strapped in and ready to begin what they hope soon will be the first assembly mission for the International Space Station. On board in the payload bay is the first American piece, which is the Unity node. It's a connecting point for future pieces of the International Space Station, as well as a docking place for future space shuttles. This is a far-flung endeavor involving 16 nations in all. It will take 5 years to build and will hold the volume of 2 747 jetliners. Some 16 nations involved, many of those dignitaries from those nations here to witness this launch, or so they hope to see a launch in just a few moments. Among them, U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. I asked her a little bit about the U.S.-Russian partnership.
Good scientifically, because the kinds of things that they're going to be able to do will deal with biology, biodiversity, climate change, a way to really map movements in this hemisphere, so that scientifically it is also very important, and it requires people to work at it together. And the fact that there is this kind of cooperation on issues that are really the issues of the 21st century, I think, is our gift to the future generation.
Many people have wondered how long it would take the Russians to complete their portions of the International Space Station. This particular mission of Endeavour was delayed for 1 year. It should have launched about a year ago this time. The problem was the economic collapse in Russia made it difficult for the Russian Space Agency to complete its portions of the International Space Station. Required a bailout from NASA to get their pieces ready. 2 weeks ago, the first piece, a Russian piece, a piece called Zarya, was successfully launched into orbit. Endeavour will rendezvous with Zarya and attach the first U.S. piece to it. 3 separate spacewalks will be conducted to connect cables and communication lines on the outside of the embryonic space station. It's a space station that has been much debated, much discussed. First proposed now nearly 16 years ago, and it is something that continues to be a subject of debate. Station. But why are 16 nations attempting this superhuman endeavor?
We need the space station because if we're ever going to live anywhere besides on Earth, this is our step to doing that.
But at what cost? One government accounting office estimates the U.S. bill for construction and operation of the space station over 15 years will approach $100 billion, much to the dismay of many scientists.
Right now, the space station stands as the single greatest obstacle to the exploration of the solar system. And that's sort of sad.
Physicist Robert Park believes NASA should still shoot for the stars, but leave the humans behind.
For a fraction of the cost of a space station, we can send armies of robots to Mars and find out if there is a reason to send a human being.
The question of whether the space station is worth it really depends on why you're doing it. As a foreign policy initiative to keep Russian rocket scientists in Russia and out of North Korea, it's a bargain at the price. If you think it's just a science project, though, it's a tremendous boondoggle and ought to be canceled immediately.
While the debate rages on, so too does the construction. 80% of the U.S. hardware is now complete.
Anybody who goes to Kennedy Space Center right now and looks at the hardware that's sitting in line, ready to go into space or close to being ready to go into space, stopping it now would also be a tremendous waste.
But is it good money after bad?
The two most important reasons to build the space station are for science and for exploration. We're never going anywhere if we can't get off the planet.
Getting off the planet is exactly what the crew of Endeavour would like to do in a little less than 8 minutes from now. And it appears the weather has improved in the time that tape piece was on. NASA has given the weather situation a go for launch. The countdown clock has resumed. There are no planned holds between now and the scheduled liftoff, now 7 minutes and 27 seconds away. The first assembly mission of the International Space Station set to begin. I also asked Secretary of State Madeleine Albright about the general nature of this 16-nation partnership.
I do think that the Russians are contributing hard knowledge to this, and that's very important. It's also very important to have Russian scientists working on this particular kind of a project rather than others. And so we're very glad to have them be a part of it, and we are obviously working to make sure that the Russian relationship is one that remains steady. It's a key relationship to us, clearly, and their financial problems are ones that concern us, and they have to develop plans to deal with them.
All right, let's go back to some live pictures here from the Kennedy Space Center. Launch pad 39A, about 3 miles over my shoulder. And if you take a look at the pictures fed down to us from NASA television, you'll see that the gantry, which takes the astronauts and the so-called closeout team into the space shuttle, has been retracted, an indication that the countdown is proceeding normally. We have thus far heard of no problems, no technical problems whatsoever to indicate that this launch would be stopped in any way. Looking at close-up right now of the shuttle's 3 main engines. That steam coming out of there is from the supercooled hydrogen and oxygen, which is inside our orange tank. This is the off-gassing, which is caused by that supercooled cryogenic fuel, some 500,000 gallons of it, which will fuel those main engines for about 8.5 minutes, helping take the Space Shuttle Endeavour into its orbit of about 240 miles. Now, this is a short 10-minute launch window. This is the way it will be for all the space station flights. You're hearing the voice of Bruce Buckingham of NASA. I'll stop when I hear him. The space station windows are very narrow because, in effect, the rendezvous begins at the launch pad. NASA wants to be as conservative as they can be with fuel, and in order to catch up with the Russian piece, the Zarya module, they have to launch at a specific time when the Zarya module is actually over New Zealand. That allows the rendezvous to occur without using too much fuel. Rosemary?
And Miles, what's the significance of the launch taking place at night, and what are we likely to see?
Well, once again, the fact of the matter is the rendezvous is the key issue here. In order to get Zarya in the right place at the right time, in order to meet it, it calls for a pre-dawn launch here at the Kennedy Space Center. They only have that 10-minute narrow window to do that launch, otherwise they will miss that rendezvous point. It will take them some 2 days to catch up with that Zarya module. When they catch up to it, there'll be some fancy piloting involved to rendezvous with it, attach it to the U.S. portion of that module, and then conduct those 3 spacewalks.
Now, Miles, we've actually heard that this mission is one of the most difficult in space shuttle history. Why is it so difficult?
Well, what I just referred to is probably the most difficult part. The piloting involved in this rendezvous is very difficult. Although the shuttle has docked 9 times with the space station Mir, in this case, the docking between the Unity node, the American piece, and the Zarya portion of the space station will be done completely blind. All right, we have a 4-minute hold right now.
ISO
An LTC violation. We'll try to get you some information on exactly what that means.
Contact clock is holding at T-minus 4 minutes.
All right, we have a countdown hold. We'll try to get you some information on that in just a moment.
So, Miles, while we're getting that information, can you tell us what's ahead for the 6 astronauts once they get in orbit?
All right, if you could just hang on 1 second, Rosemary, let's listen to this transmission.
Along with that master alarm, or is it just a master alarm? 3DR. Just a master alarm.
Okay, some sort of master alarm on board the Space Shuttle Endeavour. It's a question right now as to whether that's a malfunctioning alarm or if there is a real problem.
Flight last time to pick up is 858 Boeing 01.
Okay.
And flight I copy. And wait for Gillis copy.
All right, well, we'll see if NASA can work out this problem. And let me just explain to you, Rosemary, that once they do get into orbit, it's a 12-day mission. The first order of business is to rendezvous with that Russian piece, mate it properly with the U.S. piece, and then shortly thereafter, there were a pair of astronauts on board the Space Shuttle Endeavour, Jerry Ross and Jim Newman, will conduct 3 separate spacewalks. Let's listen for just 1 moment.
Okay. You brief us on our status. According to what we're seeing on PC4, looks like it occurred at the same time hydraulic system came up. Okay, and APU NTD? It's APU. Okay. Any indications of anomalies during APU power-up? Negative. APU is nominal.
All right, essentially what they're doing now is polling the various aspects. APU is the auxiliary power unit, the hydraulics people. They're trying to find out what caused that master alarm right now. As we say, the weather has cleared here.
Flight occurs, we got 3 good APUs and hydraulic systems.
Copy flight.
Okay, what they're doing is troubleshooting these auxiliary power units which run the hydraulic systems and the hydraulic systems themselves to see if that truly is a master alarm causing some difficulty or if the master alarm has malfunctioned.
It looks like coincided with the hydraulics. Our recommendation if hydraulics occurs is to count down to 31 to give us more time while we have this opportunity to go look at hydraulics and see if there was anything in it that might have triggered the master alarm. Okay, very good. And CHYD in today? CHYD concur to go down to 31.
1 minute.
All right, so the decision has been made that they have time to troubleshoot the problem as the countdown continues. The assessment at this juncture is that the auxiliary power units and the hydraulic systems are okay, that the master alarm was probably erroneous in some way. Now, when they say they're going down to 31...
seconds and hold there if necessary, if the reason for the master alarm sounding has not been resolved.
Once again, Bruce Buckingham helping amplify on that. They will hold at 31 seconds if need be, but they have roughly 3 minutes to go before, they only have a 1 minute hold before they lose that 10-minute window, going back once again, Rosemary, to that situation of that narrow amount of time they have in order to conduct that rendezvous.
At this time, the final aerial surface checks of the orbiter's wing, elevons, and rudder are also being completed.
Essentially, they're just checking out the main engines there to make sure that they rotate in all proper manners so that they will guide the shuttle properly.
As NASA prepares for the first of many visits to the International Space Station.
All right, we are approaching the 3-minute mark, and once again,
3 minutes and counting.
At that Launch Control Center, which is not far from here, they are working on those problems to make sure that the master alarm was not something that will cause any difficulty, anything that would stop the launch.
Go ahead. Okay, they did caution warning volume adjust earlier. That's parameter select on I-13099. That's hydraulics, right? Just, my question was just, I thought if it wasn't returned back to 120, would that have caused the alarm that was seen?
T-minus 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
All right, we're at 2 minutes and 30 seconds as they continue to work through this problem.
The orbiter test conductor has requested that the pilot...
42 seconds at the T-minus 31 second mark.
That the pilot clear the caution and warning memory system.
090130.
See the top of the external fuel tank being removed. That's used to aid and assist in the fueling process, an indication that the countdown is continuing without problems.
Continues to look good with the weather.
The clear of caution and warning. Can we perform that at this time? That's sub 1113.
We are continuing to address our caution and warning system. And the plan will be to hold at T-minus 31 seconds if that cannot be resolved.
Clear caution warning memory and verified on expected error.
Once again, a very narrow window of opportunity. Given the holds that they have been into, they will be out of the 10-minute window within a minute if the countdown goes without a hold. Once again, looking at the shuttle's 3 main engines there, providing about 25% of the thrust, which takes the Space Shuttle Endeavour into orbit. You see the 2 white cones on either side of the orange external tank. Those are the solid rocket boosters. They do about 75% of the work, and they do it in about 2 minutes' time. They're really no more than glorified Roman candles filled with a jellied fuel, which is lit, and once it is lit,
1 minute and counting,
cannot be stopped. We're at the less than 1 minute point. They're still working on that problem. We don't know if we're going to get a hold at 31 seconds.
Transferring to orbit our internal power at this time.
Do you have any further update on the master alarm? We did a memory read on C3 and see what F7 shows. Okay, please proceed.
And we are proceeding through that 31-second hold.
And we're at T-minus 31 seconds and holding as we continue to address our situation.
Apparently we're going to hold at 31 seconds.
Crew compartment.
We'd already cleared the memory read, and we had no unexpected lights, cabin atmosphere, and hydraulic from previous. Copy that.
Still trying to troubleshoot what that master alarm is all about.
Everything looks nominal.
NTD Houston Flight, we think it was System 1. We are go for launch.
ISO concurs. And SPE?
This is SPE's. ISL feel comfortable that it was a hydraulic and it was because of the system starting up.
Got to pick it up, NTD.
Affirmative.
Okay, what's up?
TLS, pick up the count on your mark.
All right, you heard Houston weighing in on that, saying that they believe that there wasn't really a problem, that the master alarm was erroneous.
We have a go.
They have go for launch. We are now at 25 seconds to launch. Let's listen in.
24 seconds. Request cutoff. Please cut off. Yes, sir. Bus taping is in progress.
And we have had to cut off the countdown. We did not pick up the countdown in time.
RSL is hold. DLS taking is in progress.
All right.
Launch window.
There you hear it.
Cut off all stations.
Cleared for launch, but not in enough time. The launch window has closed. The Shuttle Endeavour, unable to launch in time to meet its rendezvous with the Zarya module, the Russian module. There will not be a launch
The orbiter access arm is being replaced.
this early morning hour at the Kennedy Space Center.
Orbiter.
The question now is,
And safing operations are currently in work.
they begin the process of removing the crew from the Space Shuttle Endeavour, a rather lengthy process. And the question from NASA's perspective at this point, do they wait 24 hours or do they hold for 48 hours? The previous weather forecasts indicated that early Saturday morning would be better weather conditions. Nevertheless, it is possible they may try 24 hours from now. We should hear more at a briefing which should occur at 9 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow morning here at the Kennedy Space Center. They should give us more information as to when they will try to launch once again. So once again, right down to the 13-second mark, the problem with the master alarm, apparently the stumbling block in this case, causing them to waste a little bit of precious time, losing that precious window which would allow them to rendezvous properly with the Zarya module, thus causing this particular launch to scrub. Rosemary?
Miles, can you just explain a little bit more why there is such a narrow window of opportunity for this launch?
Well, when you consider that these craft are traveling at 17,500 miles an hour at 240 miles above us, it's very important that they start off at least fairly close to each other. The shuttle has a limited amount of fuel on board, a limited amount of propellant, which can send it into an orbit. It can only stay on orbit a certain amount of time. All of these things are factored in the catch-up, the game of catch-up to Zarya. So that 10-minute window is critical because otherwise the shuttle would have to load up, wouldn't be able to carry as much payload into orbit. And given the fact that it is carrying this heavy piece of the International Space Station, they are very close to their limits as far as payload and fuel to weight ratio, to use a pilot's term.
Miles O'Brien reporting from the Kennedy Space Center. And the launch has been delayed. Just repeating, the launch of Space Shuttle Endeavour has been delayed for at least another 24 hours. Now, for our viewers in Europe and Africa, here's Larry King. And for our viewers elsewhere around the world, we'll have more world news after this break. Stay with us.
This has been a CNN Live event.
The launch of the United States Space Shuttle. About an hour ago, the mission to deploy part of the International Space Station was scrubbed when a false master alarm caused the shuttle to miss its launch window. It will be about 24 hours before it can be tried again. The mission will be the first of many to build the space station. CNN's Miles O'Brien reports on the massive project.
We need the space station because if we're ever going to live anywhere besides on Earth, this is our step to doing that.
But at what cost? One government accounting office estimates the U.S. bill for construction and operation of the space station over 15 years will approach $100 billion, much to the dismay of many scientists.
Right now, the space station stands as the single greatest obstacle to the exploration of the solar system. And that's sort of sad.
Physicist Robert Park believes NASA should still shoot for the stars, but leave the humans behind.
For a fraction of the cost of a space station, we can send armies of robots to Mars and find out if there is a reason to send a human being.
The question of whether the space station is worth it really depends on why you're doing it. As a foreign policy initiative to keep Russian rocket scientists in Russia and out of North Korea, it's a bargain at the price. If you think it's just a science project, though, it's a tremendous boondoggle and ought to be canceled immediately.
While the debate rages on, so too does the construction. 80% of the U.S. hardware is now complete.
Anybody who goes to Kennedy Space Center right now and looks at the hardware that's sitting in line, ready to go into space or close to being ready to go into space, stopping it now would also be a tremendous waste.
But is it good money after bad?
The two most important reasons to build this space station are for science and for exploration. We're never going anywhere if we can't get off the planet.
Wherever the space station takes NASA, it is clearly where the space shuttle fleet is headed for the foreseeable future. 80% of future shuttle missions are now slated for space station construction. When it is completed, NASA hopes it will be a shiny new star in the sky. Its critics wonder if it will be a budgetary black hole. Miles O'Brien, CNN at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
At least 28 people, mostly. A mechanical problem has forced a delay of the launch of the United States Space Shuttle. About an hour ago, the mission to deploy part of the International Space Station was scrubbed when a false master alarm caused the shuttle to miss its launch window. It will be about 24 hours before the U.S. Space Agency can try again. And finally, they might not be, has forced a delay of the launch of the United States Space Shuttle. The mission to deploy part of the International Space Station was scrubbed when a false master alarm caused the shuttle to miss its launch window. It will be about 24 hours before the U.S. Space Agency can try again. And that's World News for now. I'm Rosemary Church. Join me for American Edition coming up after the break. Shuttle Endeavour. And a 70-year tradition kicks off the Christmas season in New York. First, here's a look at our top stories. A mechanical problem minutes before launch. The mission will deploy the first American-made piece of the International Space Station. The Unity node will serve as a docking module. 16 nations are contributing to the project.
The Hubble Space Telescope is giving scientists a look at very distant galaxies that have never been seen by humans before. NASA released a new image this week called the Hubble Deep Field South. It's a long exposure view of a patch of sky that can only be seen from the southern hemisphere. The picture was shot over 10 days, so it picked up very faint light, including light from stars at the far side of the universe, light that traveled for 12 billion years to reach the Hubble's instruments. NASA says it will take months to figure out what secrets of the universe might be revealed in the new image. A U.S.-Japanese satellite has spent the past year studying tropical rainfall and sent back some surprising data. These images of Hurricane Bonnie, taken in August, show a towering chimney cloud more than 10 miles high inside the hurricane, something scientists didn't expect to find. The red color indicates the most intense rainfall. The Tropical Rainfall Measuring Mission satellite, called TRMM for short, also discovered that raindrops are smaller than scientists thought. Studying tropical rainfall is helping researchers understand global climate patterns like El Nino and La Nina. The space program gives us unequaled views of the far reaches of the universe and the inside of hurricanes. And it also has some very down-to-earth benefits. For instance, a spin-off from space brings rocket science to the supermarket. We tried to show you this report a few weeks ago, but U.S. viewers missed most of it because of breaking news. So let's try it again. Crisp vegetables, fresh fruit, vibrant flowers. They look great in the store, but overnight they can become mushy or wilted. The culprit, ethylene gas.
You probably brought a tomato home and it looked pretty good the day that you brought it home, but the next day it's got this little spot and you open it up and it's not very good, and that's typically, ethylene damage.
Ethylene is a plant hormone needed for ripening, but too much can be costly to stores and consumers. Up to 10% of produce and 5% of flowers spoil before they're sold. And the gas from one type of fruit or vegetable can affect others around it.
They start to wilt.
A new method of removing this gas and extending shelf life is making its way to stores now. University of Wisconsin chemist Mark Anderson led a team to help NASA perfect crop growing for long-term space travel.
For this flight are 20 different experiments that have been operating for the past 3 days.
Through experiments on several space shuttle and Mir missions, he found that titanium dioxide, a common chemical used in paint, converts ethylene to carbon dioxide and water. The process is triggered by ultraviolet light.
The applications of this are so wide, it's rather amazing, almost mind-boggling.
For the earthbound application of the technology, Anderson hooked up with Kess Irrigation Systems of Georgia. The company was selling another ethylene removal process using potassium permanganate.
It works, but it's an absolute mess.
The company was happy to trade their purple powder for glass pellets. After the pellets are coated with titanium dioxide, the coating is baked on. And unless they're damaged, the pellets never have to be replaced. The unit is installed in the center of the storage area. Ethylene-rich air is pulled in by a fan, circulating it over the treated glass pellets. The fan then pushes the cleansed air back out.
By the first of the year, we'll have a unit for floral display cases, Sealand containers and trucks. Right now, we have a unit that will do up to 36,000 cubic feet, which is ideal for storage rooms for floral and produce products.
The technology could bring costs down for both suppliers and consumers and result in more fresh produce on the market all the time.
I couldn't even start to give you the billions of tons of food that can be given or handed to the end user in a usable state rather than something that the grocery stores or the commercial enterprises have to throw out.
This post-harvest cleansing could add 1 to 4 weeks to the shelf life of flowers, fruits, and vegetables. Coming up.
Suffered a delay. Liftoff of the U.S. shuttle Endeavour was postponed Thursday morning with only minutes to go before launch. The Endeavour is scheduled to begin putting together the modules of the International Space Station. CNN's Miles O'Brien has details.
All day long, NASA had been fretting about the weather. But once the clouds cleared, it was a technical glitch which rained on the shuttle Endeavour's parade.
At this point, we have a master alarm.
The alarm sounded just as the countdown reached the 4.5-minute mark. Launch controllers scrambled into troubleshooting mode. They finally decided that everything was working fine and issued the order to resume the countdown. But as it turned out, too much precious time was wasted.
Again, we have stopped the countdown clock at T-minus 19 seconds. We were not able to pick up the count in time to meet the very end of our launch window.
NASA had tried and failed to launch Endeavour through a narrow 10-minute launch window.
We want to err on the conservative side, and the best thing we can do is have discussion to make sure we understand it. And if that means we don't launch today and we launch tomorrow, I'm perfectly happy with that.
Those tight constraints are a function of this historic mission to begin assembly of the International Space Station. Endeavour is to rendezvous with the first Russian piece of the station launched 2 weeks ago, and catching up with an object already in orbit requires precise timing. Once Endeavour reaches the Russian piece, called Zarya, or Sunrise, Commander Bob 747 airliners. But all that will have to wait at least another day. Having already endured a one-year delay due to Russia's economic crisis, the Endeavour crew is well equipped to take it all in stride. Miles O'Brien, CNN at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
And that is World News for now. Thank you for watching. I'm Marina Colby. Stay tuned now for Asian Edition live from Hong Kong coming up next.